Thanks so much, Queenie. And Queenie is my amazing, incredible assistant who will make sure that they stay on track and I do everything I said I'm going to do. So thanks so much, Queenie. So I humbly acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nation, Métis, and Inuit nations. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and East Scarborough, where I live, is covered by the Rouge Tract land claim submitted to the federal and provincial governments in 2015 by the Mississaugas of the Credit. So today's agenda, I'm going to do four main things. What are funders looking for in grant applications? Talk with you about that. Provide an overview of the granting process. Again, what happens when you hit that submit button on your applications. Number three, how to ensure you provide the info that grant reviewers need. And I'll explain who are grant reviewers when we get to that section. And also talk with you about where to find grant opportunities and some resources and information that we have. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. So in the introduction, we can maybe in the chat box, let us know which city you're located in and the name of a grant that you are interested in applying for this year. I invite you to use the chat box. Let us know where you are located. Then and the name of a grant that you're thinking about, if you're thinking about a grant. All right, so we'll give folks a minute to do that. Where are you? Are you in Toronto? Are you somewhere in the GTA or somewhere else in Ontario? That's the beauty of Zoom. We can be anywhere and connect. And then the name of our grant. So what are some of the things we're getting in the chat box, Queenie?
Sorry, just a second. Yeah, we have from Toronto, Canada, Trillium Fund and Laid Low Funding Opportunity. What else? Scarborough. What else? Yeah, they're located from Toronto. Looking for any grant.
Okay, great.
Scarborough, Ontario.
Yeah, Scarborough.
Yeah.
So it's I heard Trillium. So there's a Trillium grant that's due in a couple of weeks. That's the Resilient Communities grant. I know that one's coming up. The Layla Foundation grant, that's a great, amazing grant that supports youth-led initiatives as well as youth-led organizations. So yeah, so happy to hear that what you're thinking about applying to. But again, maybe you have it, maybe you don't have a specific grant in mind. If someone says any grant, any funding that sometimes we will be happy to receive. So that's cool too. So thanks for letting me know that. So we're gonna jump into the session. Are we gonna do the poll now, Queenie? Remind me.
Yeah, just a second.
Okay, so we have another fun activity for you to do is a poll. So we're gonna launch the poll now. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, I'll be launching it now. Yeah, the first poll is launched.
Awesome. So the first question, have you ever won a grant for your organization or business? Let us yes or no. Okay, great. So we have one person who said yes, so that's great. Can we do the next? Is there another question for that one?
No, the next question will be at the end.
Okay, so that's great. So we have two persons who have one grant. Then do those folks want to share what the name of those grants are? You can unmute or put it in the chat box for us. Well, I know in the fall, I won the Starter Company Grant Plus for female entrepreneurs. I realized when I was reviewing Q3 for myself and setting my goals for the rest of the year, I said, oh, I'm always helping other people find funding. why did I apply for funding for myself? So that prompted me to apply, and thankfully I received it. It's a great, I mean, it's a small amount of money, but it's great opportunity because of the other business owners that I met. They did, I believe it was 6 training sessions that were really, really awesome. So I definitely encourage any business owners looking for, some funding as well as some training supports to definitely think about the Starter Company grant. As I said, I applied for the one in Toronto. They're available right across the province. So depending on your city or region you're in, there's probably funding available from your local city or municipality.
All right. So yeah, Michelle, Keisha Bolton answered. It was at Seneca's College Entrepreneurship Program called Helix.
Nice, great. That's great. Awesome. So yes, just to let people know that, yeah, there is funding available. You can win it, with a little bit of time and energy putting together your grant application. So let's jump into some tips that will help you write the successful grant application. So what are funders looking to fund, right? Why are they issuing a grant? Why are they issuing a call for proposals or a call for applications? Well, so what are they looking to fund? First, and most importantly, they're looking for work that is aligned with their mission. Right? So they are looking for work that helps them meet their strategic goals, that meets their mission. So for example, if it's an organization that funds and supports women and gender diverse people, well, that's the kind of work that they're going to fund. So if you're doing work with men and boys, they're not going to fund it. So always keep that in mind in terms of when you're looking for grant funding, ensure that what you want to do is aligned with the mission of the funding organization. Funders are also looking to fund work that is aligned with their strategic goals, as I said. And also you should be they're also looking for applications from organizations that are doing work that is aligned with their own mission and strategic goals. Okay, so you want to be aligned with the funder's mission, but you also want to submit an application that talks about your strategic goals and about your mission. All right, so we'll talk about that some more. So it bumps your application up when you can say, we want to do so-and-so, and we want this much of money because this work is aligned with our strategic goals and direction. Right away, you've got the funder's attention. Funders are also looking to fund activities that are effective. They want to fund work that is needed, and for businesses, work and activities that are profitable. So sometimes you'll see applications where an organization, it's not really aligned with their mission, and you're not quite sure, and then maybe they're proposing to do something new. And a funder, and we'll talk about the teams that review the applications, they will often ask, well, is this going to be effective? Is this going to work? If it's new, if it's something your organization, for example, has never done before, how do you know that it's going to be effective? So again, if it's something new that you're proposing, you want to say in your application, we know this is going to work because, and fill in the blank, because research has shown that it has worked. Or you have done an evaluation and shown that this works. Or maybe you want to say, this is a pilot project. We want to test it to see whether or not it works. That's okay, right? Funders also want to fund work that is needed. So how do you know that your community, for example, needs this particular work? Well, if you could say, from our community needs assessment, community members have told us that this is what they need. Right away, your application gets bumped up a little bit higher. And for businesses, work that is profitable. Right? How will you show that this will increase your revenue, meet your revenue targets? So those are the things you want to speak about and demonstrate in your application. Funders want to fund work with measurable outcomes. So again, how will you know that you have achieved what you want to do? Well, you want to speak to some kind of outcomes that you're going to achieve. So maybe you're going to have surveys. You're going to survey participants in the project, for example, and you'll be able to measure it that way. Maybe you're going to do exit interviews. Maybe you're going to send out surveys to your customers so they can give you feedback so that you know that what you are doing is effective, it's needed, and it's profitable. So you want to demonstrate that you're going to measure impact. They also want to fund organizations that are eligible, as well as they're going to fund what are the eligible expenses. We'll talk a little bit about those last two in another minute or two. So again, so you want to, when you're looking for funding and writing grant applications, you want to look at the funding opportunity through the perspective of the funder. Because what funders are doing, they are investing in your organization or they are investing in your business. So you want to demonstrate the return on their investment. Hope that makes sense. All right, let's keep going. So things to remember, funders will receive anywhere from 600 to 2,000 applications. So like those bigger national grants, 2,000 applications. They sometimes need to find quick and easy ways to say no, because often they can only fund a small percentage of the applications that they receive. So for many foundations, for example, that fund not-for-profit or registered charities, they may only be able to fund 10% of applications. So if they get 600, that means they can fund 60 of those applications. 540 of them, they have to say no to. So instead of giving them a reason to say no to your application, you want to give them a reason to say yes by providing them the information that they need so that they will fund your application. All right. So all is to say grant funding is very competitive. And so that's why it's really key that you kind of have this insider information so that you can really be in that yes pile. All right. So let me jump into a little bit about the granting process. Were there any questions on some of these in terms of how to think of grant application and what funders are looking for?
Quick question.
Yes.
Does it matter, or what's the difference between profit and nonprofit?
Good question. So for-profit is usually a company that is carrying out activities. When you look at what they sell their product or service for, minus what their expenses are, that's usually considered your profit, right? And then that profit can be paid out to shareholders, for example, or reinvested into the company, et cetera. Not-for-profit organizations do not carry out profit earning, perhaps, activities. So usually whatever income they have and minus their expenses, usually zero. Right, so there's not a, but more importantly, there's not a for-profit motive. They don't need to generate revenue. Instead, they're looking at impact. So providing support to communities, for example, that's usually the difference between for-profit and not for-profit.
There's another question, Michelle, on the comments. You
Yeah.
mentioned showing how you will measure impact. Can you provide some examples on how we might do that other than surveys?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mentioned surveys. It could be focus group discussions. It could be, so it's really about collecting data to demonstrate impact. It might be quotes or stories from people that you've worked with. So say you supported a family and the family has sent you a nice note, how much they appreciated what you did, the impact that it did. It helped me to find a job. It helped my son get back into school. You know, it's reduced a lot of stress in our family because of the support you provided. That's a story of impact. Story of impact is gold. It's even better than survey results because it is someone sharing a story of how your organization or your business had made an impact on them. So you can collect those stories through email responses. It can be verbally, and maybe you make a note. It might be a community organization I volunteer with. We gave out holiday food hampers over the holidays, and I got some text messages from people. Thank you so much. We really appreciate this. So you can collect that data in a number of different ways to demonstrate the impact that you've had. Right, so, and other measurable outcomes, so it might be numbers, so the number of people that you served. It might be the number of X that you distributed, so it can be numerical data, such as those numbers, or what you collect in your survey, or it can be what non-numerical data or qualitative data that you collect in an email message, just conversation, etc. Great questions, folks. Okay. So let me go on to the next section. So let me share with you an overview of the granting process. So what happens when you hit submit? Because most of the time now, you submit a grant application through a portal, through an online system. And so you literally have to hit the submit button. What happens when the funder receives your application? So first, your application is reviewed to ensure your company or organization is eligible. So this is the first layer, the first opportunity the funder has to look at your application and ensuring that you meet the eligibility criteria. So if it is funding for a business, it's going to ask, are you a corporation or a sole proprietor? Maybe you had to provide your articles of incorporation or your master business license to show that you're a registered business. They may ask for your 2022 revenue, for example, maybe your financial statements or something. For not-for-profit organizations, they're going to ask, are you a registered charity? So you have to provide your charitable number that Revenue Canada issues, or are you a not-for-profit organization and are you incorporated? For foundations and other charitable organizations that do granting, currently the law is that they can only donate to other charities. Sometimes they can do not-for-profit, but if they are a charity, they can only donate to charities. So you'll have to provide that proof. Sometimes they will allow you, if you are not-for-profit but not a registered charity, they may ask that you partner with a registered charity in order to receive the funding. And that's just because of how the Income Tax Act is written. There is legislation now before the House to change that, so that not-for-profit organizations can be funded directly through other registered charities, so that hopefully we're hoping that that will change, because of course it creates more funding opportunities for organizations that are not-for-profit but may not be registered charity. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. So you have to ensure that you are eligible. If you're an individual, often you will not be funded. Sometimes schools are not eligible, municipalities, government organizations are not eligible. So, but sometimes people will try. But I'm telling you, at that first thing, again, they need reasons to say no, because often they can't fund 90% of the application. So if you're not eligible, you get booted out of the system, you get the thank you, but you are not eligible at that first stage. Next step. So they reviewed your application, you're an eligible organization, you have submitted all or at least most of the supporting documents. So for your application, then your application is assigned to a grant review team. So grant review teams are usually volunteers that have signed up to review grant applications. Like, these people are awesome. These are awesome people. So it might be on each team, it might be 2 or 3 persons who are going to read all of the same applications. So each person is going to read anywhere from 20 to 60 applications, depending again on how many applications are received, as well as how many teams they are. For like a national funding, they will be assigned teams based on which province or territory they're in. Or if it's provincial like Ontario, it will be, the grant review teams will be assigned based on the town or region they're in. So they're going to go through and read all of the grant applications. Because they are volunteers, however, they don't have much time to read. So you know, they're reading on the weekends, they're reading in the evenings between making dinner, help if they have kids, helping them with homework, doing their own thing. So they don't have a lot of time. So they really are spending the maximum 15 minutes on your application. So you have to write it very clearly, very concisely, because essentially they're skim reading all these applications. Okay, that makes sense. These folks usually have expertise in a particular subject area or an industry. So they tend to have very high expectations and they can be very, very picky. Okay. So I was surprised the first time I met up with the grant review team, like, oh, whoa, these people are, yeah. But you know, but they're picky for a good reason, because they only want the best applications to be funded. They want the foundation or the organization that they are volunteering with, they want them to make only the best investments. So that's why they'll be very, very picky. Okay. These teams recommend which applications should be funded. So they're very important people in the grant application process. Oftentimes, again, it's behind the curtains. If you've never been involved in a granting process, you may not realize, but these are usually volunteers who are reading your applications. They don't have a lot of time to dedicate it, but they have very deep knowledge of an issue or an industry. And so which applications they recommend, the funder follows that recommendation, let's say. They don't usually dispute that. All right, so that is the grant review teams and the important work they do. So these are the grant reviewers make up the grant review teams. So what are they looking for when they're reading your application? Well, they're assessing if your activities are eligible. So the first step was determining whether or not your organization is eligible. Those ones that are not eligible, they're bumped out. They don't even make it to the grant reviewers. The grant reviewers are doing a little bit more detailed read of the application. They'll assess if your activities are eligible. They will also recommend the amount of funding that you'll receive, because sometimes you can receive up to this amount. So sometimes, you know, they might recommend less. One granting process I was a part of, sometimes they recommended more money, believe it or not. So if the funder has extra money, they'll say, you know what? Again, these people are amazing. For example, they said, we noticed these organizations, they're not paying their staff a lot. Can we suggest that they get more money so they could increase the salaries of these folks, or to provide benefits for their staff? So again, these grant reviewers are highly respected in the funding process because they have that kind of perspective. They're also looking at your capacity to deliver the project. So oftentimes, if you're a small organization or if you're a newer organization, the question will always be, do you have the capacity to do what you said you're going to do? Sometimes in the not-for-profit world, you know, we're working or volunteering in not-for-profits because we want to change the world, like full stop. We want to change the world. But sometimes you cannot do that with a $20,000 grant. So sometimes you have to rein in, pull in your expectations and really ensure that you can deliver as per what you are proposing in your application, because you want to do an amazing job on your project. You want to ensure that you deliver the activities that you said you deliver them on time, you deliver them on budget, and that the persons that you are serving are super, super happy with what you've done. So sometimes when I do a little, you know, when I talk with folks or do a little coaching, I'm thinking, well, maybe you just want to scale back a little bit, right? So it doesn't have to be a grand, huge save the world, serve 10,000 people. Sometimes the smaller you are, the more focused you are, that demonstrate that you can be more effective. So just want to share that thought as well. And they may also request additional information from you as well. All right. So if something's not clear in your application, they may want to go back to you as the funder. Can you ask them to explain this? Doesn't usually happen, but every now and then you may get that request for additional information. All right. So that's a little bit about the granting process. So then they make their recommendations. The team, I should have added, that team of 3 or 4 people come to a conclusion on terms of which ones they're going to say yes to, which ones they'll say no. They'll make the recommendation back to the funder. Then the funder determines, who's all going to get funded, and then you will get that email back from them, either yes, we're funding you, congratulations, or sorry, we're not able to fund you, and hopefully they give you a couple of some feedback in terms of what was missing from your application.
Michelle, we do have 2 questions on the chat. Maybe you want to answer it.
Sure.
First question is from Tekiona, sorry. Do you need a business plan or grant proposal before applying for grants?
If you are a business, yes, you should have, it helps if you have a business plan. Most funders will be looking for that.
Hey,
because then they're
I'm
also
Tatiana. I asked that question. I was just kind of wondering because like I'm in the process of where I help people find grants and funding and things of that nature. And like a lot of applications I've done, I don't really see too many of them that have the option of like uploading that. But I was just wondering if that's like a requirement, because I want to like make sure I'm leading people the right way.
No, that's a great question. So for business funding, usually they ask for a business plan, and particularly especially if it's a loan. So if it's a loan, you definitely have to have a business plan, because it will include sales projection, revenue, forecasts, etc. Some of the funding for small businesses, for startup businesses, they won't require that. But what they'll do is they'll take you through training sessions so that you'll have a business plan by the end of that session. So, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so another question from Christopher. Does a network of community partners that can provide in-kind services assist an NFP org application as meeting the capacity threshold to be funded?
Great question, Christopher. And yes, definitely a lot of funders that are funding not-for-profit organizations and charities will consider in-kind contribution. Definitely to help with capacity. So in-kind can be time to like project supervision, project management might be an in-kind. And that could be an in-kind from a paid staff member or from a volunteer. If you're going to have a project advisory group, for example, you can speak to that as in-kind. And usually there's a space on the application to itemize that and to put a dollar figure to that amount. So if in-kind is there, definitely you should, I would highly recommend you include in-kind. Because funders want to see that you're also contributing to if it's project funding, for example, program funding, they want to see that you are also making an investment. So in-kind is an excellent way to show that. So in-kind, for people who are not familiar with that term, it is like non-monetary contributions that you'll be making. So in-kind might be space, right? You're going to provide space for the program to happen. It might be materials, or it might be, as I said, time, staff time, or volunteer time. That's a great question. Thank you. All right. So let's keep going. So third thing I wanted to share with you today, ensure you provide the information that funders need. So let's talk about what I mean by that. So for step 1, read through the grant guidelines and pay particular attention to one, eligibility criteria. I mentioned that more than once. Ensure you are eligible for the grant, because if not, they'll say bye-bye in that first step. Read through the grant guidelines, pay attention to what is eligible and what is ineligible. Each grant can be quite different. Some grants will allow capital expenses, some may not. So ensure that you read what is eligible and ineligible. Again, they'll be looking for that in your grant application, but sometimes it gets missed because, again, it's really the grant reviewers who have time to read each application, and they're reading it so quickly they may miss that. So there have been instances where organizations have done, completed their grant, completed their project, submitted their final report. I'm reading the final report and I'm like, yikes, they included a capital expense. We can't fund that. So then, what happens? We have to go back to that organization and say, sorry, this expense is ineligible. You have to take it out of your budget. Sometimes they have to repay that money back to the organization. So you must understand the difference between expenses that are eligible and those that are ineligible. Understand the total amount of the grant award. What is the funding timeline? So is it a 6-month project from, let's say, February 1st until July 31st, 2023? Is it a 12-month project, let's say, from February 1st, 2023 to January 31st, 2024? Ensure that you understand that timeline, because that's when you have to complete all your activities and we have to spend all the funds. And you never, ever, ever want to return funds to a funder. The funder doesn't want your money back. They funded you because you demonstrated a need. So they don't want the money back. So ensure that you are able to spend the funds within the timeline. But of course, the last 3 years have been so unusual. So some organizations are having trouble hiring people, so they can't spend their salary, or maybe they couldn't, or with the supply chain issues, people couldn't order equipment. My suggestion is that you always reach out to the funder before that deadline, that spending deadline, and just have a quick conversation. And usually when I'm talking to folks, a 10-minute conversation, we can brainstorm a couple of ideas and I can provide a couple of suggestions in terms of what they can do. So definitely your funders are there to support you once you receive the funding. So ensure that if you do receive the funding and you're having any trouble spending the funds, reach out to them and let them know. Ensure you're aware of the application deadline, of course, because now that everything is online, that portal shuts down at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, if that's the time, like it automatically shuts down. So you want to ensure that that you're aware of that application deadline. And my screen just give me 1 second, folks. My screen just shut down.
Michelle, we do have like another comment from Christopher. So maybe
Okay.
you wanna answer. The experience I have had in written or supporting funding proposals, I have
Yes.
yet to win here. What is the suggested verbiage to request feedback from the founder to now strengthen once the application the second time around of the sign?
So Christopher saying he doesn't usually receive that feedback. Yeah. Sorry, I can't. So you can request a meeting to get some feedback. If there is a contact person, you could definitely reach out to them. Or, in the sector, trying to encourage funders to provide, 2 or 3 comments in terms of why they decided against the application. Sometimes they just don't have the capacity within the organization, because again, if they receive 600 applications and 550 of them are not going to be funded, they often don't have the capacity to, meet with 500 people. But one thing that the national charity that I've been working with, what we did was in those declined emails, we included 2 or 3 sentences that the grant reviewers, the feedback from them of why their application wasn't funded. So it kind of is a middle ground. can't meet with everyone, but at least trying to provide some feedback. I know other funders like the Ontario Trillium Foundation, they try and be more proactive. So they have webinars where you can learn what are their expectations. You can also book a coaching call. And then you can meet with a program manager and ask questions to find out as well. So yeah, it's still a gap in terms of getting that feedback so you can improve. But slowly, I think funders are getting a little bit better at providing that feedback. Okay, so. Sorry, everyone, I'm having a technical glitch here with my computer. All right, so just give me 1 second. Let me see if I can bring up the PowerPoint on my phone. Oh dear. And then we'll continue. Because I wanted to share a little bit with you in terms of the third section we're on, and then wrap up by talking about where you can find grant funding. So just a moment. My apologies.
Hi, Michelle. Maybe also you want them to, while we're waiting, maybe you want them to fill out the form regarding with the webinar attendees.
Oh, that's a great idea. Do you want to pop that in the chat? So we are providing a Google form. We're inviting you, if you'd like to provide your name, the name of your organization or business, and your contact information. We would love to have that information so we can share it with others, because there may be some networking that can happen between people who are here. So Queenie's going to put the link to that in the chat. And so when you have a few moments, you can fill that out, but we'll also send an email tomorrow with all of that information so that you'll also have the survey, the Google Forms link in the email that you receive tomorrow, if you wanted to provide that information about your organization or your business, so we can support each other. Okay, I'm so sorry, but I'll also send the slides tomorrow so you'll have them. But in terms of what other things that what other information you want to ensure that you provide so the grant reviewers can review, you want to ensure that, well, we talked about reading through the grant guidelines. After reviewing the grant guidelines, decide whether or not this grant aligns with your mission or your vision. If it does, then great. If it doesn't, maybe this isn't the grant you want to apply for. Because again, I think it's really important that the funder as well as the grant funding aligns with what it is that you're doing in your organization as well as in your business. Once you realize that there is that kind of alignment, then great, you're ready to start working on your grant application. Collect all the documents that you're going to need to upload. Again, because the applications are submitted on a portal, usually you'll need to upload some information. So as a charity or a not-for-profit, it might be the list of your board members. It may be your most recent financial statements, that kind of information. Ensure that you have handy. You want to start writing now. You're step number 4. Now you're ready to start writing. Read the application. To understand the information that you need to provide. Step number 5, equity and inclusion are very important considerations right now. So ensure you can speak to how your company and organization actively works to achieve equity and justice. I can't emphasize this enough. Most funders are looking for applications from, BIPOC-led organizations. That's Our BIPOC survey, BIPOC meaning Black, Indigenous, or persons of color. So you want to be able to ensure that you meet that particular focus, that many funders, and be able to speak to that in your application. So how who's on your board of directors? Is it diverse? Then talk about that. Who do you serve? And more importantly, how do you serve them? So sometimes I've seen applications where, an organization will say, oh, we work with Indigenous peoples, but they don't have Indigenous people on staff. They don't speak to a particular model, you may not have Indigenous people serving on their boards of director. So then the grant reviewers are going to question that. So ensure that you can speak to that in your application, that you can demonstrate that you are BIPOC led, BIPOC serving. Your leadership team includes diverse representation. Again, that's going to bump up your application. For step number 6, for each question you answer, ask yourself, what is the information that the funder wants in this question? You want to say, how can I best answer this question? How can I demonstrate? How can I best tell my story in this particular question? So when I write funding applications, like I literally stop at each question and I ask myself that. So I pause and I think, So it's really about going a little bit deeper. And so sometimes the first response you write may not be your best response. So I'm encouraging you to kind of pause for a minute and think, what is it that they're really asking? How can I go a little bit deeper? Is this the best answer I can provide? And does this tell the best story that I can tell? So I know you're probably writing these applications, an hour before they're due, or, because you're doing so many other things. But if you can, give yourself a little bit more time when writing your applications, or give yourself more time to edit it. Sometimes it's helpful. You can start an application and save it and come back to it. So you might want to do that first, run through, fill out the application, answer all the questions, then kind of think about it for a day, and then go back in there and then edit. Go back there and edit. And of course, because the applications are all online, there's a word count limit. Oh, the word count limit. Sometimes it can be so difficult, and that becomes an art in and of itself, to say what you need to say, provide the information that the funders need to tell the best story that you can about your organization or your business, all within 100 words. So again, giving yourself time to edit, to do what's called wordsmithing, take up the and the ands, so that you can shorten your answers and really provide the best answers. Often, for some questions, I will use a numbered list or a bulleted list just to save on the words. And also I find when I use a numbered list or a bulleted list, it's easier for someone to read. So instead of a long paragraph with, 5 or 6 or 7 sentences, I will do 3 or 4 bullets. And then it's much easier to tell my story, to tell it concisely, to tell it clearly. And so that grant reviewer can very quickly understand what it is that I'm proposing to do. And then number 7. So the final things in terms of the information that you need to provide, you want your application to demonstrate that, we talked about that, the funding is aligned with your organization and your business's strategic goals and strategic priorities, that you can complete the project on time and on budget, that your clients or communities will be stronger, they'll be better, they're more deeply satisfied as a result of the activities that you will carry out. And that you have the resources, whether human, technical, or financial, to continue in your pursuits. So the investment that the funder makes is an investment in your organization or your business. They want to ensure that there is a good return on their investment, as I mentioned earlier. So that you can deliver, that the people who will be involved will benefit from what you do. You know, in 2023, we're talking about making positive, long-lasting benefits to community members, to your customers, to your clients. So you want to be able to speak to that. And the other thing I like to remind folks is that suppose if you're getting, let's say, a 12-month grant, you want to be able to demonstrate what's going to happen on month 13. So when that funding is over, what happens to that program? What happens to your organization? What happens to your company? So that's why you want to demonstrate that everything's going to be stronger, better, more deeply satisfied as a result of this investment. Oftentimes when I'm working with organizations, they make this case that they're so needy, like you're so needy, like you're basically, your doors are going to shut down if you don't get this money, which may be true. But then what happens after the grant? Are the doors going to shut down? Because then I'm not funding you. Then you may as well shut down the doors now. I'm not going to give you 12 months. So one client I was working with in December for the Trillium Foundation grant, again, it's this story, and I'm like, I totally get it. You have these needs. And I kept thinking, I'm not getting it. I don't see the story. I don't see the story. And then finally it was, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to say that during the 12 months of this funding, you're going to develop fundraising. You're going to set aside, you know, this much to cover your core operational costs. That shows that you are going to leverage the grant, another term in fund. You're going to use this grant to deepen the stability of the organization. Then I'm like, okay, now I can write the funding application for you. So something else to keep in mind is that you wanted to demonstrate that your organization is stable, it is growing, your business is growing, it's going to be around for a really long time, and this funding is going to help push you forward. I hope that makes sense, what I was just saying. All right, so let me move on to where to find grant opportunities, the last section, and then I'll open it up for questions. So there are 4 ways to learn about grant opportunities that I'm going to suggest. 1, follow funders on social media. If you're on social media, you should be following some of the funders. So someone said they're thinking about applying to Layla Foundation and the Ontario Trillium Foundation. Follow those folks on Twitter, follow them on, I don't know if they're on Instagram, but whatever social media accounts that you have, follow them. Then you'll hear about their granting opportunities. They'll have post reminders. You could ask questions, right, on social media. What I like even better than following them on social media is signing up for their e-newsletters. So if you go on their website, or maybe there's a link in their bio if they're on social media, sign up for their e-newsletter. Business is mainly still done by email. So you want to get that newsletter in your inbox every month, because again, that's when you're going to hear about a new grant opportunity. You can sign up for their webinars, etc. So I sign up for, and Queenie will tell you, I sign up for a lot of newsletters when she sees them all coming in my inbox, but because that's how I keep on top of when things are happening, right? So definitely sign up for their e-newsletters. A great way, instead of you having to look for the information comes directly to you in your inbox. You can subscribe to a service that provides information on grants. Usually that's a paid service, but that's an opportunity as well. But the 4th way is we are doing that legwork for you. We have compiled a list of funding opportunities across Ontario as well as across Canada, and we update this list on a monthly basis. So Queenie, if you don't mind, would you share? Queenie's going to share the link in the chat to the Google Sheet.
Yes.
You can have access to that. Don't worry, we'll also include it in the email that we send out tomorrow. You can see by location where you're located. I think we have about 40 grants that are there right now. Grants for businesses, grants for not-for-profit organizations. So definitely a way, just a service we're offering to folks so that, again, you can help, they will help you in finding those opportunities. You don't have to go searching for it. We are compiling that information for you.
Yeah, and also Michelle, sorry, Kwame, sorry for the pronunciation of your name, but he or she provided a link for view the latest grants and resources for NGOs and nonprofits Canada. Yeah, on the comment section, and we'll include this one also in most of the links that we'll be sending out tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Queenie. So we're gonna open it up for questions at this point. We're right at the top of the hour.
Yeah, so Michelle, there are 2 questions from Christopher. With funding apps that don't get funded, curious what happens to the funding application? Do they get tossed or looked upon for further reference?
What happens to them? They probably stay in the portal or the database. It becomes, they're not really looked at again, other than the funder might say, oh, X organization, oh yes, they've applied to us 3 times before and we funded them once, but not the other 2 times. So it's there as kind of organizational memory, but it's not referenced. The application is not used as a reference, again, not usually.
Yeah, and another question from John Neil. So how do you start writing? Just talk about your business, or is there a structured format you suggest?
So usually in an application, you're answering, a number of different questions. One of the ways you can organize yourself before you even start writing is having on, whether it's a Google Doc or a Google Note or Keep or some document where you have like your mission statement. You have like your legal name, if you're not for profit or charity, your charitable number, your for-profit, your business number, your mission statement. So keep that information on a 1-page document. I learned this a year ago. Someone suggested it because it's super, super handy. When you're applying for grants, you're just copying and pasting it into that online application. So and more specifically, in terms of answering your question, yes, you're going to talk about your business. So you want to talk about it in terms of your mission. What are your revenue targets? You often talk about what successes you've had, like how many customers did you have in 2022? How much revenue did you generate? What were some of the challenges that you had? Why maybe you didn't reach those targets, and then what are your plans moving forward? So that's some of the things you want to talk about in terms of your business. You also want to talk about your unique value proposition. Why should people buy from your company, right? So we have a lot of skincare companies that make skincare products. Let's say with shea butters. Lots of companies that do that. What makes your company and its products unique? And it could be the product itself. It could be your level of customer service. It could be how quickly you're able to fulfill orders. But what makes your company unique? And really the question is, why should customers buy from you? So that should be some of the things you want to talk about in your application for a business.
Yeah, another question from Michelle. How many times can you apply for the same grant if declined?
Good question. this national funder that I've been working with for the past 2 years. There's one organization, and they're like, oh, so-and-so has applied again. So sometimes you keep applying until you get it right. It doesn't detract from your application, because again, it's the grant reviewers who are making that decision, and sometimes for different grants and different grant cycles, it'll be different people. It's not necessarily the same people who are reading the application. But if you are applying, like if you've applied twice and you haven't been successful, you probably need to reach out to someone and ask for some help. Get someone to review the application, give you some feedback, so that you can just fine tune it. Maybe there's something that you're missing that you're in your previous applications that you want to improve on in your next application. So writing grant applications is really an art. So how I write applications now is not how I wrote them 10 years ago when I was a senior manager at a not-for-profit organization. So for many of us, we're excellent writers. We communicate extremely well. I know I would write grant application and I'd be like, oh, wow, that's really good. Oh, I'm proud of myself with that one. That's really good. And then I don't get funded. So also remember that, so I had to learn that when I'm writing applications, I'm not the audience of my application. I am not writing to impress myself. So that's why in today's presentation, I really encourage you to think of it like a funder. Would you invest in your organization? Would you invest in this business? And so sometimes you need someone to help you work through how to kind of do that assessment in your application. So hopefully your next application will be successful. So yeah, you could apply more than once to a funder. There's no limit. But practically, if you apply twice and haven't been successful, I would encourage you to reach out to someone who has some expertise, who can look over your application with you.
Yes, so another question from Natalie Walters. How many questions are typically in the grant application?
That is a really good question. I would say on typically between 10 and 15, maybe. So there's usually 3 or 4 main sections. So the first section is your contact information, who you are, how you are connected to this organization or this business. Then the next section is what is your organization or your business? What is your mission or vision statement? When did it start? Who's on your board? That kind of information. And then the third section, you're actually getting into the grant application itself. What are your proposed activities? What are your timelines? Those kinds of questions. And then the fourth section is usually your budget. So like Trillium Foundation, you type the numbers in. Most applications, you upload a budget, usually an Excel sheet, complete that. Sometimes usually they'll have a template and you complete the template and then you upload it or add it to your application. And then the fifth final section is your acknowledgement or your attestation. You're kind of signing it off, not with a signature because it's digital, but thing that, I have the authority to submit this application on behalf of this organization or this company. You'll probably check a box, enter the date, etc. So those are usually the main sections, maybe 10 to 15 questions. Some grant applications are fairly straightforward, usually the smaller amounts, but not always. And then the larger grant may ask for more information.
All right, so we have another question from Michelle. Can you switch between profit and nonprofit? What is the best for an organization?
Say that again, Queenie.
Can you switch between profit and nonprofit? What is best for an organization?
Oh, that's a good question. Can you switch between not-for-profit and for-profit? You can. I mean, but it's basically a new organization that you'd be creating. You need new banking information, etc. But But one way that you can combine both in one organization. So this is called a social purpose business or a social purpose organization, also sometimes called a social enterprise. Okay. So this is newish. I mean, the last 10 years in Ontario and across Canada, it's becoming more common, more popular. So what it is a not-for-profit organization that has some revenue generating activities. So a not-for-profit organization or charity has revenue generating activities. The government now recognizes that always having to seek grant funding, always having to raise donations is very stressful on organizations. So it's now creating some room for this kind of blended concept. And how it works is that these revenue generating activities, kind of quote unquote profitable, but that's in quotes, because that profit from those revenue generating activities are reinvested back into the charity or the not-for-profit organization. So an example of this is, like, for example, I serve on the board of directors at the Jamaican Canadian Association. So if anyone knows the JCA, we rent out hall and event space at the building that we own at 995 Arrow Road. So that's our social enterprise. We generate income, revenue from our hall rental business that we then invest back into the organization for our community services. So that's one way. So instead of creating a hall rental business separate from the charity, we are able to integrate it into our activities as a social purpose enterprise, a social purpose organization or a social enterprise. So back to so to answer your question, which one is better? It depends on what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve. You can switch from one to another, but it's essentially you're creating a new organization. And so this social enterprise, social purpose business is a model where perhaps you can have both within one organization. So any other questions, Queenie?
Another question from Christopher: how does one retain your services?
So great question. So definitely feel free to send me an email. It's just my first name, michelle@mvdconsulting.ca. I am so sorry. That was going to be the last slide on my presentation. My screen is still blank, but my camera is on, thankfully. But we'll send out an email tomorrow, so you'll have my contact information, and we can talk further about how I could support your organization or your business. So any other questions before we wrap up for the evening? Well, thank you again for being here. It was wonderful having you. I hope this information was really helpful. I hope I was able to provide you with some tips and insights that'll help you when you're writing your grant application. We are thinking about maybe holding a part 2 or a follow-up to today's webinar. I was thinking, for example, if folks are applying to one of the grant opportunities next month, maybe we could get together and work on an application together. Would people find that helpful? Right? We could all be working on a grant application. Let's say it's the Trillium Foundation grant that's coming up, or the Community Services Recovery grant that's due next month on the 21st. I could share my screen, show you how I'm answering questions. So let us know. When you can send us an email or message us on social media if you follow us on social media, and let us know. Or let us know if there are other topics you'd love for us to talk about in a webinar. Maybe it's managing a not-for-profit organization, maybe it's finding staff, maybe something with business planning and visioning. We'd be happy to hear back from you, and because I'm really about adding value to community. So yeah, if there's any way that I can do that through additional webinars and sessions, I'd be happy to do that. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Michelle, by the way, do we need to send them the feedback form or just tomorrow?
Yeah, we can send it in the email tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Have a great night.
Thank you, Michelle. Have a great night.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you,
You're
Michelle.
welcome. Thanks so much for being
Thank you,
here.
Queenie. You did a great
Great
job
job.
also.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Michelle, are you going to send the presentation? Because I missed half of it because I was on the road.
No
Are you
problem.
going to
Yes,
email
yes.
this?
I'll send it tomorrow as a PDF document. I'll send a copy of the recording, the slides, a list of grants, all that good stuff.
All right. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Michelle,
Yeah,
is it okay if we share this, when you send that, is it okay if we share it like widely?
absolutely. Hey, Keisha, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thanks. I can see no one. I have a blank screen, so I can only hear.
Oh my gosh, I don't know how you're doing it.
I'm trying to remain cool.
You're holding it down.
But yeah, definitely, because I know some people in your group would be maybe interested in it. So please feel free to share it with them.
I definitely will.
All right.
Thank you. And thank you so much. That was so much more than I expected. Wow.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Well,
Good
thank you
job,
so much.
Michelle.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
It's easy with the TD app. Okay, okay.
Have a great night.
Yes, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Casino. Find your favorite casino